Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project. Excited for this episode where we're going to talk about hacks versus lasting change. So why is there this desire to find the quick fix with everything? And what challenges do we have with that? And what's a better alternative? Also, what does that tell us about our relationship with faith? Dive into this episode, listen as Mark and I talk about this. Let us know what you think. Hey Mark.
Hey Chris.
How's it going?
It's a good day.
Good.
It's a good day.
Good.
So we were talking earlier.
Yeah, we tend to do that.
We do tend to do that. And you brought up something that I'm pretty curious about.
Okay.
About hacks, and you didn't sound too enthused about them, versus lasting change. And as usual for me, pretty curious about that. So what was it you were talking about when you were talking about hacks, and how is that not effective for lasting change, or is it?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency that I see today of everybody trying to find the hack for the latest thing, and it's genuinely not super effective. I can't tell you how many articles and blog posts I see that say 7 hacks for this or way to hack doing this. I am a little bit frustrated with that language because a lot of the work that we do as trainers is about how do we help individuals, leaders, organizations exhibit lasting change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the downside of that is everybody comes expecting the hack. Like, just do this one little tweak, everything will fix, everything will be perfect. Like, what's the secret missing ingredient for things? And that's often not the case. Normally there's a lot more complexities, change that's needed beyond just one simple thing. It's more systemic. So that was the root of what I was thinking there. It was one of my railings, one of my events about society.
Can you believe people who want hacks? It sounds like magical thinking almost. Like, I wish I had a magic wand and I could just wave that, just do this one thing and everything's better.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, I think there's very much a try one thing, see. Well, it's not even try one thing. There's very much this, a magic wand idea of just come in and fix this and we'll be all better. Like some of the work we do 16-hour classes for organizational change, process control, things like that. And folks come in expecting by the end of the class they're going to be an expert. And that's not at all like what we promise, or is it the intent? Yeah. Or would that even be achievable? Instead, what we are hoping, at least personally, what I'm really hoping to achieve is that we inspire folks to start their learning journey and align around what they're trying to do and figure out what are the first steps that I want to take in order to get to where I want to go.
It's interesting you describe it that way. I think you've infected me enough that when I heard hacks, I was literally thinking about it that way. Like, what's the next step I can take where I can learn if that's getting me closer to the lasting change that I'm after? And so that's why I was confused by what you said. And yet the way you're describing hacks, I see it. Yeah, it's like if I'm trying to do this one thing that's just going to solve it, that's a different perspective entirely on it. And that is, I don't see God offering that too often if I think about it scripturally.
Right.
Where he'll just say, okay, sure, here, everything. Sometimes he does that. Kind of like he reserves the right to show up like that. And a lot of times it seems like it's a process of taking small steps. And it seems like those small steps to me are about things like learning a skill, which is not something typically that you just do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're not even aware you're learning a skill, but if you're intentional about it, it's over a period of time, for example, as opposed to I've just got to wave the magic wand kind of thing, or say it this way and everything will be great kind of thing. It's just simply not the way that most of the situations we're in work. There's a lot more, as you said, there's a lot more complexity to it.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to know is there are always steps that you can take. I think the difference in my mind when I think of hack is this is the step I need to take, and then everything
Sure.
will immediately be fixed.
Yeah.
Instead of this is the first step along the path. Because habits are, in my opinion, how you really get lasting change. That you have systems, you have processes in place, and that sounds really, really formulaic or really clinical.
Yeah.
But our brains, and there's all kinds of research to back this up, and there's tons and tons of books about habits. I know.
First book reference, I'm so surprised.
But there's so much science behind it that our brains, for their sake of their own survival, we tend to do a lot of things subconsciously and not even think about them. It's why we'll get in the car and when we're driving home from work, not realize the turns that we took and all of that.
Right.
Because our brains routinized, if that's a word.
You just made it.
Let's go
We'll go with it, yeah.
Routinized some things. And that's how you can free up space and time to think about other more important things in your brain. And so habits, as we start to shape those and shift those to be more intentional to what we want to get, that's how lasting change becomes not just something that we're doing, but something that becomes part of us.
Yeah.
And so hack is kind of trying to shortcut a lot of that because habits take time and skill to develop.
Yeah. It seems like at best what we could hope for that would be the closest to what people seek out with hacks are if we've already got a bunch of skills and we're like really close. You're like, if we applied it just slightly differently, like imagine if you held the screwdriver this way, kind of change.
Yeah.
But that's not what most of us are dealing with. Oftentimes we don't even have the tools in our toolkit to address things. I'm just thinking like relationship skills, for example, because those are many of the classes that we teach. People come in and they are expecting, okay, we're going to give you a formula of how to connect well with people. And there actually is formula, reflective listening, which is a fine formula. And yet it is just a skill to practice. The expertise of when to apply it and how to apply it is expertise. I mean, that is using it multiple times enough to know that in this situation, here's when I would use that. And here's how it sounds natural for me. And here's how it helps the other person recognize that I'm trying to be with them. And that's not something you learn by just going, it sounds like you are feeling upset about me repeating your words. That's not how that works, right? You don't just have a formula for that. And yet without the skill, without the formula, you don't get there either. It's kind of that, oh, why can't I just hack?
As you were talking about that, I was picturing somebody that's in construction. And they have tools they do in order to accomplish their job, make it easier, actually build the thing or change the thing or demolish the thing that they're trying to do. But I imagine a lot of people come to a really complex problem or something they've never dealt with before with, like, I remember I had a little toolbox as like a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And it had a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, a tape measure, and a level.
Right.
In it. And a hammer.
I was going to say, I didn't have a hammer.
Yeah, you got to have the classic
hammer, probably.
Yeah, it was a little tiny head on it. But I think a lot of people come to complex situations like that and think, okay, tell me how to use this Phillips head screwdriver in order to cut a 2x4. Right. And that's not going to work. Like, there's definitely this piece of you need to add the skills and figure out when do you apply them. Yeah. But there's also a big challenge with, imagine you're trying to build a house. Mm-hmm. There's so much more than you need for that beyond the skills that you have. And the mindset that I think is the main thing I have a challenge with. The mindset that I can just add one little tiny skill and everything will get revolutionized. Like, I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves by coming with that approach.
I agree. I'm thinking of like craftsmanship even. So building a house requires craftsmanship, or pick a beautifully crafted even table, which structurally is not terribly complicated. But if you want a beautifully crafted table, you need to learn about how wood works, right? And how the grains of the wood operate and so on. And that's not something you just pick up a chainsaw and make a beautifully, you know what I mean? Like, that's, you have to have somebody who knows it and can mentor you in it.
Although I have seen people take chainsaws and make beautiful things just with that.
Fair. It's not just about the tool.
But that is an acquired skill.
That's actually to the point though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, hey, so here's the hack. Just have a chainsaw. You're not going to end up with a beautifully crafted thing that's your, how do you start this thing? It's your first question.
Right.
You're not going to end up with something beautiful. What do you think's driving that? I guess what I'm trying to get to in asking that question is, if I'm somebody who is just looking for that hack, like so far in our conversation, I might feel like I'm just being told, stop it. Right? Don't do that. What's something, not a hack, unhack your hacks, whatever, but what's something that I could consider, I could look at, probably inside myself, that would help me make the shift towards something that's more about lasting change? And I think that might start with motivations, is why I asked that.
Yeah. So you had a couple parts to your question.
That was multi-layered. You're welcome. Have fun with that one.
That's all good. I think the first was, why do people have such a desire for hacks?
Yeah.
And then the second was, okay, if you're telling me to stop doing this and stop having a desire for hacks, what can I do instead?
Yes.
Cool. Nice. Reflectiveness.
Look at that.
I think the first is, there's just this sense of overwhelm. Anytime I talk to anybody, I'm busy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about the conversations you've had over the last couple of weeks. How many people have said, or you say, how's it going? Oh, just busy. Right? Or you look at their calendar, you feel like your calendar is just overwhelmed.
Right.
And so it's super natural for people to want to have a quick fix when that's all they have time for to fit into their schedules. And so the challenge is, a lot of times those things we try and implement and then don't ever do any follow-up on them, and then give up on them and they don't work. Right. And so it's actually more wasteful to try and do all of these hacks at the same time.
So maybe one of the questions, being my nickname is question mark, one of the
Mark.
questions to the rescue. One of the things that someone could ask in that situation would be, heading into wanting to find something, is, how would I kind of follow up? What would I do after I try this and understand if it worked, to try and build that loop of like, then what would I do next?
In one sense, I think yes. In another sense, I might disagree.
Okay.
I think one sense is the direction that I think that we get to with lasting change is a habit, see how it works, and adapt. So in that sense, yes, absolutely. In the larger sense, I think it's the mindset that we approach change as. Because if you are constantly going for hacks and under the belief that just doing this one thing is going to fix the problem that I have, you're just going to end up getting frustrated. Unless it's something super simple that somebody's had a proven recipe for doing something. Like I said, most of the time that's not the case. Right? So in order to combat that frustration, you need to understand and think about, this is a process in order to get to something that's lasting change. Not just a one-time hack, it's fixed forever, but it's incremental improvement, not a night and day difference, which can sound frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially for people that are in a situation where like that sense of overwhelm is there.
Or even amp it up a little bit and pain.
Right? Sure. Yeah. Not just frustration, but pain.
And even if I amp it back down, unamp it, whatever, it sounds to me like what we're asking people to do is to feel less endorphins, to get less endorphins, to feel less of that good stuff, right? That's part of what I tend to do when I'm trying to find the short-term fix. Is like, I want to try something because marking it off my to-do list and saying, I did the hack, I did the thing, feels good.
Sure. Yeah.
To look at it and say, like, you know what, actually, it's going to be a while before it feels good. That's a delayed gratification play, which I'm all about, and is really hard to retrain myself into that habit.
Yeah.
What's your hack for that?
Yeah, I think it's this need for short-term fulfillment with some of our biggest challenges.
Yeah.
And like you talked about earlier, a wise person once told me, rarely does God do everything all at once, and rarely does he do nothing. And I think there's that mindset that we get one or the other, and really there's a whole lot of gradients in between. And it really is long-term thinking. And I think when it comes to biblically, I think it is prayer and it's obedience, which sounds super oversimplified. But if you're thinking in a moment, like asking God, what are you wanting me to do in this situation, moment by moment? I think that's where faith comes into play. Instead of, I need to take the reins and take control of my situation. And if I just implement this hack, then everything will be all good. Like that very much is, I think this is where I'm trying to get to holistically.
Yeah.
Is that's very much a self-driven approach instead of a partnering with God driven approach.
Yeah. And
God doesn't give hacks most of the time.
Quotable. I'm not surprised we're finding ourselves back at some of the core conversations that we've had and keep returning to. The word that was coming into my mind as you were talking, and then you said it, so I agree with it, is faith. Mm-hmm. I think it's the essence of faith. Do I have faith that this thing that is painful or frustrating or whatever, or just doesn't feel good in some way? Do I have faith that God is at work in that? God will use that, right? And if I act as John Eldredge would say, with practical agnosticism, right? That in practice, I walk out as if I'm agnostic. I'm just going to grab the reins and make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
Then I'm going to probably have more tendency toward the hack end of things. And if I walk out faithfulness, right? filling that moment full of being faithful and expecting God to be faithful to what he says, then I'm going to tend to be able to be more patient, I guess, in those circumstances. Not passive.
Yeah.
I'm not saying passive and don't take action necessarily, but patient to say, I don't know what the process is that God's up to here. God would, and that leaves us open to ask it all. Like, okay, God, I don't know if this is how you're choosing to act here, but could you just solve this? Right? And sometimes he will. And he wants to hear that. And on the other hand, say, or if you're at this in a long process, help me, grow me in the midst of this so I can learn what you're up to and cooperate with you in it instead of fighting you, because the hack approach is actually fighting God in many cases.
So if we're talking about this, it's not so much hacks versus lasting change. It's whose control is it?
Yeah.
My control, or partnering with God to give control to him.
Yeah. Didn't think we were going to go there.
Yeah, me either.
I started talking about hacks.
So the hack for this is have faith.
Stop hacking. Oh my goodness.
Stop trying to hack it.
Yeah.
Thanks again for tuning in to today's episode of the Human Project podcast. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, Mark Wavle, and our lead editor, Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Most of what we do is free because of your generous support. If you want to learn more, check us out at humanproject.us. Thanks for partnering with us. Looking forward to talking in the next episode.